My name is Mark, and at 68 years old I thought I had seen everything life could throw at me. I was wrong. Dead wrong. What I'm about to tell you happened just 2 years ago, and it still makes my blood boil every time I think about it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. I met Sarah when I was 25, fresh out of college with an engineering degree and a head full of dreams. She was 23, working as a receptionist at a law firm in downtown Chicago, with the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen. We got married 2 years later, in a small ceremony at St. Mary's Church, surrounded by our families and closest friends. Those were simpler times when a handshake meant something and people kept their word. For 41 years, I thought we had a solid marriage. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but we always worked through them. We built a good life together. I worked my way up from junior engineer to project manager at Morrison Construction, one of Chicago's most respected firms. Sarah stayed home when our daughter Emma was born, then went back to work part-time when Emma started school. We lived in the same 3-bedroom house in Oak Park for 35 years, the house where Emma took her first steps, where we celebrated countless birthdays and holidays, where I thought we'd grow old together. Emma was the light of our lives, a bright, ambitious girl who excelled in everything she touched. She played violin in the school orchestra, made honor roll every semester, and volunteered at the local animal shelter on weekends. When she started talking about college in her sophomore year of high school, Sarah and I both knew we wanted to give her every opportunity we could. That's when we started the college fund. I remember the day we opened that account at First National Bank like it was yesterday. Emma was 16, and she had just been accepted into the National Honor Society. Sarah and I sat across from Mr. Peterson, the bank manager, as he explained the details of the education savings account. We agreed to put away $500 every month, without fail. It wasn't easy on a construction manager's salary, especially with the economy being what it was, but we made sacrifices. We drove our cars until they couldn't run anymore, took our vacations at nearby state parks instead of fancy resorts, and Sarah clipped every coupon she could find. Over the next 6 years, including the 2 years after Emma graduated high school while she was at Northwestern University, we built that fund up to $63,000. $63,000. Every penny of it earned through honest work and careful saving. Emma was in her junior year, studying pre-med with dreams of becoming a pediatrician, when the first strange thing happened. It was a Tuesday morning in October 2022. I remember because the leaves were just starting to turn, and I was getting ready for work when the phone rang. It was Emma calling from her dorm room, and she sounded upset. "Dad, I just got a notice from the financial aid office. They're saying my tuition payment bounced. How is that possible? I thought you and Mom handled all of that." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "Bounced? That can't be right, sweetheart. Let me call your mother and the bank. I'll get this sorted out right away." But Sarah had already left for work at the insurance agency, where she'd been employed for the past 15 years. I tried calling her cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. That should have been my first red flag, but I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was in a meeting. I called the bank instead. When Mr. Peterson pulled up our account, the silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that I thought the call had dropped. "Mr. Williams," he finally said, his voice careful and professional, "I'm showing that your education savings account was closed 3 months ago. The entire balance was withdrawn by your wife, Sarah Williams, on July 15th. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "Closed? What do you mean closed? We never authorized that." "I have the paperwork right here, sir. Mrs. Williams came in with proper identification and signed all the necessary forms. The withdrawal was for the full amount of $63,427. My legs went weak and I had to sit down on the kitchen stool. July 15th. That was 3 months ago. 3 months, and Sarah had never said a word. I'd been writing checks for Emma's expenses, thinking we were drawing from the college fund, not knowing that Sarah had secretly wiped out everything we'd saved. "Mr. Peterson," I managed to say, "I need copies of all that paperwork, every single document. Can you have that ready for me by this afternoon?" "Of course, Mr. Williams. I'll have everything prepared. And, sir, I'm truly sorry about this situation. I called in sick to work and spent the rest of that morning trying to reach Sarah. Her cell phone continued going to voicemail, and when I called her office, her secretary said she had called in sick as well. That was another red flag waving right in front of my face. By noon, I was sitting in my car outside the bank, staring at the stack of documents Mr. Peterson had given me. Sarah's signature was on every page, clear as day. The withdrawal slip, the account closure form, everything. But what really caught my attention was the destination of the funds. Instead of being deposited into our joint checking account like I would have expected, the money had been transferred to a new account that I'd never heard of. An account in Sarah's name only. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with questions and possibilities, none of them good. When I pulled into our driveway, Sarah's car was there. She was home, supposedly sick, but her car wasn't there when I'd left for the bank. Another lie. I found her in the living room, sitting on our old brown couch with a cup of tea, watching her usual daytime talk show. She looked up when I walked in, and for just a split second, I saw something in her eyes that I'd never seen before. Fear. "Mark, you're home early. Are you feeling all right?" I set the bank documents on the coffee table in front of her. "Emma called this morning. Her tuition payment bounced." Sarah's face went pale, but she tried to maintain her composure. "Bounced? That's impossible. There must be some mistake." "No mistake, Sarah. I've been to the bank. I've seen the paperwork. You withdrew every penny from Emma's college fund 3 months ago, and you never said a word." My voice was steady, but inside I was screaming. "Where's the money?" She looked down at the documents, then back at me, and I watched as 41 years of marriage crumbled in her eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I can explain." "Then explain. Because right now our daughter thinks we can't afford to keep her in school, and I have no idea where $63,000 of our savings went." Sarah stood up and walked to the window, her back to me. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock we'd received as a wedding gift from her parents. "I met someone," she said finally. Those 3 words hit me like a physical blow. In all our years together, through all our problems and disagreements, I had never once suspected that Sarah was capable of infidelity. She was the most trustworthy person I knew, or thought I knew. "Met someone?" I repeated, barely able to process what she was saying. "His name is David. David Richardson. He's 52, divorced, and he owns a restaurant in Santa Fe." She turned around to face me, and I could see tears in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy for her. "We met online 6 months ago. It started as just friendship, but it became more. 6 months. She'd been living a lie for 6 months while I worked extra hours to contribute to Emma's college fund, while I planned our upcoming 40th anniversary celebration, while I told everyone who would listen how lucky I was to have such a wonderful wife." "And the money?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand where this was going. David's restaurant was struggling. The pandemic hit his business hard, and he was about to lose everything. He needed capital to keep the doors open, to pay his employees, to rebuild. I wanted to help him. With our daughter's college money. "I was going to pay it back," she said quickly. "The restaurant is already doing better. David's been sending me payments. I was going to have it all replaced before Emma needed it for her senior year." I sat down heavily in my recliner, the chair where I'd read Emma bedtime stories, where I'd watched countless Bears games, where I'd fallen asleep so many Sunday afternoons while Sarah cooked dinner in the kitchen. Everything in this room held memories of our life together, and now it all felt like a lie. "How much has he paid back?" I asked. Sarah's silence was answer enough. "How much, Sarah?" $3,000, but he's working on getting the rest. The restaurant business is complicated and— $3,000. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Out of $63,000, your boyfriend has managed to pay back $3,000 in 3 months. It's not like that, Mark. David isn't just my boyfriend. We're planning a future together. The room started spinning. I gripped the arms of my chair and tried to focus on breathing. A future together. I was going to tell you after Emma graduated. I didn't want to disrupt her education. David has been looking for a house for us in Santa Fe, a place where we can start over, where I can help him run the restaurant. Using our daughter's college money to buy a house with another man. It's not just about the money, Mark. I haven't been happy for a long time. We've grown apart. We barely talk anymore except about bills and schedules. When's the last time we really talked? Really connected? I wanted to argue with her, to defend our marriage, but as I sat there looking at this woman I'd been married to for 4 decades, I realized she was right about one thing. I didn't know her at all. The Sarah I thought I knew would never steal from her own daughter's future. The Sarah I thought I knew would never carry on a secret relationship for months while planning to abandon her family. So what happens now? I asked. You take what's left of our savings and run off to New Mexico with your restaurant owner. I want us to handle this like adults, Mark. I'll file for divorce. We can split everything fairly. The house, the retirement accounts, everything. Everything except the $63,000 you already gave to your boyfriend. David will pay it back, I promise you that. But her promises didn't mean anything anymore. I looked at this woman who had shared my bed for 41 years, who had raised our daughter with me, who had been my partner in everything, and I saw a stranger. That night, I called Emma and told her there had been a problem with the bank, that her tuition money would be sorted out within a few days. I couldn't bear to tell her the truth over the phone. She deserved better than that. I also called my brother Tom, who had retired from the Chicago Police Department 5 years earlier. Tom had always been the pragmatic one in our family, the one who thought through problems methodically. When I finished telling him the whole story, he was quiet for a long time. Mark, he finally said, you need to understand something. What Sarah did wasn't just morally wrong, it was illegal. That money was in both your names for a specific purpose. She had no right to take it without your knowledge, especially not to give it to another man. I don't want to have my wife arrested, Tom. She's not your wife anymore, brother. Not in any way that matters. And if you don't take action now, you're never going to see that money again. This David character has no legal obligation to pay you back, and Sarah will be in New Mexico starting her new life, while Emma's education hangs in the balance. Tom was right, but it took me another sleepless night to accept it. The next morning, while Sarah was at work, or wherever she was really going every day, I drove downtown to the law offices of Martinez and Associates. Elena Martinez was a friend of Tom's, a sharp attorney who specialized in family law and financial crimes. Elena listened to my story without interruption, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me with intelligent brown eyes. Mr. Williams, your wife has committed several crimes here. Financial fraud, theft, potentially identity fraud if she forged any documents, but more importantly for your immediate situation, she's violated her fiduciary duty as a joint account holder. We can definitely get your money back, but it's going to require aggressive action. What kind of action? First, we're going to file for an emergency restraining order against both Sarah and this David Richardson, freezing any assets they have access to. We're also going to demand immediate restitution of the full amount, plus interest and legal fees. If they don't comply, we'll pursue criminal charges. The thought of Sarah in handcuffs made my stomach turn, but the thought of Emma having to drop out of school made it turn even more. Do it, I said. Elena moved quickly. Within 48 hours, she had filed all the necessary paperwork. Sarah was served with the restraining order at her office, and David Richardson was served at his restaurant in Santa Fe. The order froze all their bank accounts and demanded immediate return of the stolen funds. Sarah came home that evening in a fury I'd never seen before. She stormed into the house, waving the legal papers, her face red with anger. How could you do this to me, Mark? Having me served at work in front of all my colleagues? Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I was sitting at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper and eating a sandwich, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy in the chaos my life had become. I looked up at her calmly. Not nearly as humiliating as finding out your wife of 41 years has been stealing from your daughter's college fund to support her boyfriend. I told you David would pay the money back. And I told Elena Martinez the same thing. She laughed. Apparently, men who need their girlfriends to steal money to keep their businesses afloat aren't usually reliable when it comes to paying it back. Sarah slammed the papers down on the table. You're going to ruin everything, Mark. David's restaurant is just starting to recover. If you freeze his accounts, he'll lose everything. Good. Maybe he should have thought of that before he took money that didn't belong to him. It was my money too. I had every right to use it. For Emma's education, yes. Not for your boyfriend's failed business. We stared at each other across the kitchen table, and I realized this was probably the last real conversation we'd ever have as husband and wife. Everything that came after this would be filtered through lawyers and court proceedings. I want you out of the house, I said quietly. Tonight. Go stay with your sister, go to a hotel, go to New Mexico for all I care. But I don't want you here anymore. Sarah's anger crumbled into tears, but they were tears of self-pity, not remorse. Mark, please, we can work this out. We don't have to involve lawyers and judges. We can handle this between ourselves. The time for handling this between ourselves was before you stole $60,000 from our daughter's future. She left that night with 2 suitcases and our Honda Civic. I kept the Ford F-150 that I'd been driving to job sites for the past 8 years. It seemed fitting somehow. She got the car we'd used for date nights and grocery runs, and I got the work truck. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and private investigation. Elena had hired a private detective to look into David Richardson and his restaurant, and what we found was illuminating. David's Southwestern Grill wasn't just struggling, it was a complete financial disaster. The man had over $200,000 in debt, a history of failed businesses, and had been sued by multiple investors over the years. He wasn't just a bad businessman, he was a con artist who specialized in convincing women to invest in his ventures. But the most shocking discovery came when the private detective dug deeper into David's personal life. He wasn't divorced, as he'd told Sarah. He was still married to his third wife, a woman named Patricia Richardson, who lived in Albuquerque and worked as a nurse. Apparently, David had been running the same scam on multiple women simultaneously, using dating websites to find lonely, financially stable women who could fund his failing businesses. Sarah wasn't David's girlfriend. She was his mark. When Elena presented this information to Sarah's attorney, the case changed dramatically. Sarah, who had been fighting the restitution order, suddenly became very cooperative. She agreed to return what money she still had access to, about $8,000 from her personal accounts, and to cooperate fully in the effort to recover the rest from David. The problem was that David had disappeared. The restaurant had closed suddenly, and David was nowhere to be found. The private detective traced him to Las Vegas, then lost the trail. It looked like Sarah's boyfriend had taken the money and run, leaving her holding the bag for the theft. But Elena wasn't finished. She filed a civil lawsuit against both Sarah and David for the full amount, plus interest and legal fees. More importantly, she worked with the district attorney's office to file criminal charges. Interstate wire fraud, theft, money laundering. David Richardson was looking at serious federal time if they could find him. It took 6 months, but they did find him. He was arrested in Phoenix, Arizona, trying to run the same scam on a retired teacher he'd met online. When federal agents searched his apartment, they found evidence of at least 12 other women he'd defrauded over the past 3 years, totaling more than $400,000. David Richardson pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud and was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. As part of his plea agreement, he was required to make full restitution to all his victims. The court ordered the liquidation of all his assets, including the closed restaurant, his car, and even his personal belongings. From David's liquidated assets, I recovered $32,000. It wasn't the full amount, but it was enough to keep Emma in school until she graduated. The rest would have to come from Sarah. Sarah's divorce attorney tried to argue that she was as much a victim as I was, that she'd been manipulated and deceived by David, and in some ways, that was true. But the fact remained that she had stolen money from her own daughter's college fund without telling her husband. Victim or not, she was responsible for her actions. The divorce proceedings were messy and painful. Sarah fought for half of everything, including half the house and half my retirement savings. But Elena had a strong case. Sarah's theft had violated her fiduciary duty as a spouse, and her affair constituted marital misconduct under Illinois law. In the end, I kept the house and the majority of our shared assets, while Sarah was ordered to pay restitution for the remaining $31,000 from Emma's college fund. To pay the restitution, Sarah had to liquidate her retirement account, taking a substantial tax penalty in the process. She also had to get a second job, working evenings at a department store, in addition to her day job at the insurance agency. It would take her years to pay back what she'd stolen, but Elena made sure the court order was ironclad. Sarah couldn't discharge this debt in bankruptcy, couldn't negotiate it away, couldn't escape it. She would pay back every penny, with interest. Emma was devastated when I finally told her the full truth about what had happened. She cried for hours, not just for the money, but for the destruction of our family. Emma had always looked up to her mother, had always seen Sarah as the stable, reliable parent, while I was the one who worked long hours and came home tired and grumpy from construction sites. "How could she do this to us, Dad?" Emma asked through her tears. "How could she choose some stranger over her own family?" I didn't have a good answer for her then, and I still don't now. People make choices, and sometimes those choices destroy everything they've built. Sarah chose to believe a con artist over the family she'd been part of for 4 decades. She chose immediate gratification over long-term responsibility. She chose a fantasy over reality. Emma finished her junior year at Northwestern, and with the money recovered from David's assets plus what Sarah was paying in restitution, she was able to complete her senior year as well. She graduated summa cum laude in May 2024 and was accepted to medical school at the University of Chicago. She's there now in her 2nd year, studying to become the pediatrician she's always dreamed of being. The medical school expenses are substantial, but Emma qualified for grants and scholarships based on her academic performance, and I've been able to help with the rest using my retirement savings. It's worth every penny to see her pursuing her dreams, to know that Sarah's betrayal didn't derail Emma's future. Sarah and I finalized our divorce in March 2024. She moved to a small apartment on the other side of town and continues to work her 2 jobs to pay off the restitution. We don't speak except when absolutely necessary, usually regarding legal matters or Emma's needs. Emma has a relationship with her mother, but it's strained and complicated. The trust that once existed between them may never be fully repaired. As for me, I'm still living in the house in Oak Park, though it feels different now, quieter, lonelier, but also more peaceful in some ways. I don't have to wonder if the person sharing my bed is lying to me about where she's been or what she's done with our money. I don't have to question whether the woman I'm married to actually wants to be married to me. I retired from Morrison Construction last year at 67 with a decent pension and my 401k intact, thanks to Elena's aggressive divorce strategy. I spend my time now reading, working in the garden Sarah never cared about, and visiting Emma when her schedule allows. I've joined a woodworking club and have been making furniture for Emma's apartment. Simple projects mostly, a bookshelf, a coffee table, a desk for her medical school studies. Sometimes people ask me if I'm dating, if I'm looking for someone new to share my life with. The honest answer is no, not yet. The betrayal Sarah inflicted goes deep, and it's hard to imagine trusting someone that completely again. Maybe someday, but not now. For now, I'm content to rebuild my life on my own terms, to figure out who Mark Williams is when he's not part of a couple. I've learned some hard lessons over the past 2 years. I learned that you can live with someone for 4 decades and still not really know them. I learned that people are capable of rationalizing almost anything when they want something badly enough. I learned that sometimes the person you trust most in the world is the one who will hurt you the deepest. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. When everything fell apart, when my world collapsed around me, I didn't just survive. I fought back. I stood up for my daughter's future and my own dignity. I refused to be a victim of Sarah's choices. The money is back, almost all of it. Emma's education is secure and her future is bright. Sarah is paying for her crimes, both legally and personally. David Richardson is in federal prison where he belongs. Justice, messy and imperfect as it is, has been served. And me? I'm 68 years old, divorced and starting over. Some people might see that as a tragedy, but I don't. I see it as a new beginning. For the first time in decades, I get to decide what I want my life to look like without having to consider anyone else's secret agenda. Emma stops by for dinner every Sunday, and we talk about her classes, her patients, her dreams for the future. She's dating a nice young man named Michael, who's studying to be a physical therapist. They make a good couple, and I can see in Emma's eyes that she's learned from her mother's mistakes. She values honesty, loyalty, and commitment in ways that maybe she wouldn't have if she hadn't seen what happens when those things are absent. Last month, Emma asked me if I regret marrying her mother, if I wish I could go back and make different choices. It's a question I've asked myself many times over the past 2 years, 41 years of marriage, and most of it was good. Emma wouldn't exist without that marriage. The life I built, the man I became, the experiences I had, none of that would have happened without Sarah. But I told Emma the truth. I don't regret the years when our marriage was real, when Sarah was actually the woman I thought she was. I regret the lies, the deception, the theft, the betrayal. I regret that Sarah threw away something good for something that was never real to begin with. But I don't regret fighting back when she wronged our family. I don't regret standing up for what was right. The college fund has been rebuilt, not for Emma, she's almost finished with medical school, but for her future children, my future grandchildren. Every month, I put money into a new education savings account, just like Sarah and I did 20 years ago. But this time I'm the only one with access to it. This time there are no surprises waiting to destroy a family's dreams. I think about David Richardson sometimes, sitting in his federal prison cell, probably planning his next scam for when he gets out. I think about Sarah, working 2 jobs to pay back money she never should have taken, living alone in her apartment, her dreams of a new life in Santa Fe long since shattered by reality. Mostly, though, I think about the future. Emma's graduation from medical school, her residency, the day she opens her own practice. Maybe wedding bells someday, and grandchildren to spoil. Maybe even eventually someone new in my own life, someone honest, someone trustworthy, someone who understands that love isn't about grand gestures and secret adventures, but about showing up every day and choosing your family over everyone else. The house in Oak Park is quiet now, but it's mine. The future is uncertain, but it's honest. The money is back where it belongs, Emma's dreams are intact, and justice has been served. Some stories don't have happy endings. This one doesn't either, not in the traditional sense, but it has something better. It has the truth. And after 41 years of living a lie I didn't know was a lie, the truth feels like victory enough. My name is Mark Williams. I'm 68 years old and I got my life back. More importantly, I got my daughter's future back. And in the end, that's all that really matters.